What would you do with $8 million in cash? Buy a mansion? Travel the world? Well, for 7 men in 1978, they didn't have to dream about it. They actually stole it. And not just from any ordinary place, but from JFK Airport in New York City. The heist was so elaborate and well executed that it left law enforcement scratching their heads for years. How did they do it? Who were these men? And where did the money go? In this video, we will delve into the story of how 7 men stole $8 million at JFK Airport and the mysteries that still surround the case today. From idle daydreams to a deadly heist. Meet Louis Warner, the shipping clerk who never expected to be a criminal mastermind. But when greed and opportunity collided, he and his partner in crime, Peter Grunwald, pulled off the unthinkable. Billions of dollars in cash and merchandise were theirs for the taking. Little did they know, sudden wealth can come at a deadly cost. Tune into the tale of Lufthansa's cargo terminal on December 8, 1978, and hold on tight. Friends turned foes, a flawless plan, and a hunt for robbers. The thrilling account of America's greatest heist. For Louis Warner and Peter Grunwald, the only missing piece was a team to pull it off. As their partnership crumbled, the plan faded into obscurity. Warner's desperation grew, debt accumulated, and threats escalated. Enter Marty Krugman, the infamous bookie and Robert's Lounge, a haven for criminals on the edge. But in this deadly game of cat and mouse, only one will come out alive. Robert's Lounge, where the criminals meet and schemes turn into reality. Enter the infamous Robert's Lounge gang, a group of thugs and hustlers always on the lookout for their next score. Louis Warner, deep in debt and in dire need of a solution, shared his master plan with the notorious bookie, Marty Krugman. But when Krugman passed the idea to his boss, the ruthless mob enforcer Jimmy Burke, things escalated quickly. What followed was a violent and terrifying tale of armed robbery, scams, and survival. From violence to vulnerability, now let's discuss the fall of Jimmy Burke and the rise of a criminal empire. With a reputation for brutality, Burke was a force to be reckoned with. But when the mob demanded results, even Burke needed a plan. Enter Warner's master plan, a heist worth millions. But to pull it off, Burke needed more than a perfect plan. He needed the approval of New York's major crime families. And with the blessing of Paul Vario, a captain of the Lucchese crime family, Burke and the Roberts Lounge gang were ready to strike. Armed and dangerous, they made their move late at night, knowing that the haul would be enormous. Breaking in and breaking bones, the Lufthansa heist, a plan worth killing for. With only a skeleton crew on duty, the Roberts Lounge gang knew the perfect time to strike. Splitting into 2 teams, they executed a brilliantly simple plan. Capture the lunchroom employees and secure the cargo terminal. But make no mistake, these were no cowboys. The mob knew the risk of bloodshed. Too much attention would bring unwanted heat. So they sent along a soldier to keep watchful eyes and ears on the scene. And as Burke felt the pressure for the plan to succeed, he knew that it wasn't just about pride or money. It was a matter of life and death. The scheme moved forward, but the stakes were high. It was a do-or-die situation with no room for errors. As the clock approached 3 a.m. on Monday, December 11, 1978, Burke's team rolled into the Lufthansa cargo terminal, splitting into 2 teams. They moved with precision, clearing security and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As they swept the building for employees on lunch break, 1 man went down, leaving only 9 to go. Meanwhile, Team 2 waited in the van, feeling the weight of heavy ski masks and the tension building. But Team 1 had a plan. Warner's floor plan provided the blueprint to find the lunchroom, and they moved forward with a steady hand. The tension was palpable as the heist unfolded. The 5 masked men executed their plan with precision, handcuffing everyone in the lunchroom to avoid any resistance. But the real challenge was yet to come, capturing the supervisor and any other employees who may be roaming around. Even the slightest mistake could bring their carefully crafted plan crashing down. And then, a glitch. A worker returned unexpectedly and noticed the suspicious van. The gang quickly grabbed him to avoid being discovered, but the commotion threatened to blow their cover. The warehouse manager stepped out and it all went wrong. 2 men in masks forced them into the van, threatening to kill them if they went to the police. The robbers even took their IDs, reading their addresses. Meanwhile, the supervisor was lured to the lunchroom and caught. They demanded to know where the security guard was but didn't trust the supervisor, so they took him along on their hunt for the guard. It was a messy and dangerous situation, and the tension was high. The new security guard was caught off guard, having only worked at Lufthansa for 2 weeks. As the robbers closed in, he struggled to remember his training and fight off the overwhelming boredom of the graveyard shift. But with a firm grip on his collar, they made him comply. Meanwhile, Tina scoured the building for the 2 missing employees, fearing the entire plan could be jeopardized. Finally, the garage door rumbled open, revealing the 2 men under control. With everyone accounted for, the robbers turned to the supervisor, demanding access to the alarm. But at the last moment, they hesitated and made him do it himself. "Now we're talking business," exclaimed one of the robbers as they made their way to the high-value room. The manager tried to reason with them and offered the money, hoping to avoid any harm. But the robbers had a mission to accomplish and went on with their plan smoothly. As they rushed to the high-value room, the adrenaline kicked in, and they worked quickly to collect the unmounted gems and currency shipment bound for Chase Manhattan. The haul included used bills from American tourists, making it almost untraceable. With a renewed sense of energy from their success, they swiftly loaded 72 boxes in just a matter of minutes. As the night wore on, the team kept unloading box after box of money and jewelry, until the van was overflowing. They couldn't bear to leave any of it behind, but they knew it was time to make their escape. With the chase car following closely behind, the gang made a clean getaway, sticking to the speed limit to avoid drawing any unwanted attention. As the sun began to rise, the van pulled into a warehouse garage, and the men set to work unloading their precious cargo. Each one knew they would get a cut, but only after Burke and the mafia bosses got their share. However, as they looked around the hall, they realized that the loot was even more massive than they had anticipated. The harsh reality of being part of the mob is that only the top guys get to enjoy the spoils of a heist. The workers, like these robbers, are lucky to walk away with $50,000 or $60,000 each. Burke, the mastermind behind the Lufthansa heist, ordered his henchman Stack Edwards to dispose of the van immediately. They used a car crusher to destroy any evidence that could tie them to the crime. Burke took charge of the money, leaving his accomplices in the dark about the true size of the haul. They had to learn about it on the news, which reported a figure between $3 to $5 million, although it was not confirmed by Lufthansa Airlines. At the time, the heist was the talk of the entire country, with the final estimate being around $7 million in unmarked bills and $1 million in unmounted gemstones and gold. The haul was virtually untraceable, and the timing was impeccable. But as they realized just how big the heist was, the men began to crumble. It was just too much for them to handle. The amount of money they received now seemed like peanuts in comparison to what the FBI was offering for information about the crime. Some members of the gang even hinted to Burke that they needed more money to keep his name out of it. The magnitude of the heist ensured that the authorities were not going to give up until it was solved. The FBI knew that the smoothness of the operation meant that there had to be an inside man. It was an inside job, and when Lufthansa employees were questioned, 2 names repeatedly surfaced: Grunwald and Warner. There were many who claimed that they were involved, but there was insufficient evidence and no one to testify. So they decided to keep a close watch on them. The next day, when Warner showed up for work, Peter Grunwald confronted him. Grunwald knew that Warner had stolen the plan and betrayed him. He warned him that he wouldn't get away with it. However, Warner was confident that he had already had the FBI's attention. The investigators believed that Grunwald and Warner couldn't have executed the heist on their own and had another suspect in mind. Law enforcement officers from various agencies, including the Port Authority at JFK, were vying to take credit for solving the case. The police were aware of Jimmy Burke's involvement at the airport and were determined to connect him to the Lufthansa heist. The courier and the warehouse manager provided descriptions of the 2 men who had held them captive in the van, but the manager's memory was hazy due to fear. The FBI attempted to create an artist's sketch of the suspects based on his account, but it was of little use. However, 3 days after the robbery, a parking officer in Brooklyn spotted a van matching the victim's description. The van had been reported stolen and was searched for evidence. While the fingerprints found inside were inconclusive, the detectives discovered a wallet belonging to one of the victims. This was the van that was used in the Lufthansa heist, the same van that Stack Edwards was supposed to destroy. Several days later, detectives found Edwards shot to death in his apartment. We know that he hung out at Robert's Lounge and was a knock-around guy. As soon as he was found dead with a bullet in the back of his head, it was clear that he was involved. Meanwhile, Lewis Warner started receiving portions of his cut, 10% of the total take. It arrived little by little in a variety of secretive ways. However, unable to control his conspicuous consumption, Werner purchased a new van. The FBI was already keeping an eye on him, and they noticed his newfound wealth. They had also learned that his bookie was Marty Krugman, a member of the Roberts Lounge gang. Krugman was the connection to Burke that the investigators needed. They were only partially surprised that he wasn't there. When he failed to reappear, he was presumed dead, and his body was never found. The links between Jimmy Burke, the crime boss, and Lewis Werner, the inside man, were breaking one by one. Every time they got a lead, every time they found somebody else who might have been involved, they would try to act as quickly as possible to get justice. But as soon as they got one thing, they would turn around and find another dead body or another dead end. It was extremely frustrating. The FBI thought that if they put pressure on Werner, he'd give them the connections that would lead to Jimmy Burke. To get to Werner, they pressed his old friend Peter Grunwald, who was subpoenaed as a material witness. That's when everything started to unravel, because once Grunwald was put under pressure, he folded like an accordion. The FBI orchestrated an accidental meeting between Grunwald and Werner at headquarters. Grunwald had already confessed to authorities about his conspiracy with Werner. It's unclear if Werner acted alone in stealing the plan and robbing Lufthansa. Despite this, investigators had enough evidence to charge him with the crime. But they had a bigger target in mind: Jimmy Burke and the Roberts Lounge gang. Werner refused to cooperate and demanded to go to trial, denying any involvement. The investigators pleaded with Werner, telling him he couldn't beat the case and offering him a reasonable deal if he cooperated. They needed him to reveal the critical connection between him and Jimmy Burke's gang. Without it, they couldn't make their case. But Werner wouldn't budge, and he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. After several months, he had a change of heart and decided to talk, revealing the identities of his contacts to the authorities. As Lewis Werner finally prepared to tell the truth, it seemed he was too late. Many of the names he intended to mention were already dead, thanks to Jimmy Burke's foresight. Burke had anticipated the possibility of being betrayed and had eliminated most of his gang. This left the police with nothing but the realization that the Lufthansa heist, the most elaborate American caper of its kind, was also the most futile. None of those involved with the heist lived to spend their money. Burke himself regretted the day he heard about the money at Lufthansa, calling it cursed. Anyone who touched or came near the money seemed to meet an untimely end or a prison sentence. In the end, Burke was sentenced to life in prison on unrelated charges, while Werner was the only person charged with the crime. To this day, none of the $8 million stolen has ever been recovered, presumed to remain in the coffers of organized crime. So there you have it, the incredible story of how 7 men pulled off the biggest cash robbery in American history. With that said, thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our channel. Also, press the bell icon so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.